Hello. My name is Angelo Newsom, born in the city of Decorah in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, California, in the country of America, which is my home. So those of you that's watching this, what this video is about to encompass is something that's very important, and it will allow for you to be able to look at things from different point of views and different perspectives, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to like how things was done here in America, but also from a global standpoint when it comes to business, when it comes to different type of things. That's very important. But what I want to talk about right now is because a lot of times it's a lot of stuff that's going on here in America, and the things that I want to talk about is this concept of America was built on a nation of immigrants, which is true. But however though, and that's the reputation that a lot of people put out there, but however they forget like how America was founded. So what I want to point to is how America was founded, but also the countries and the continents that played a pivotal role in our founding forefathers being able to purchase land over here in America and other things. So I'm going to talk about Spain, I'm going to talk about Britain, and I'm going to talk about Africa, because these are places that played a pivotal role in America even be founded. Like, to start from the beginning of this shit, right? You might hear about different type of explorers, right? So when we talk about explorers, you think about Christopher Columbus, who set about like traveling the world in different type of ways, and he was effective because he traveled the world. But what you don't hear about is that actually the explorers before him are a Moroccan of African descent named Evancio, right? Now, Evancio was an African explorer. He's a very pivotal person, right? Because like the way that he was exploring shit back in the days, you gotta think like they was on boats and ships and all that. But he was an explorer that was captured. He was captured by the Portuguese, and that was the Portuguese ended up enslaving him and sending them off to the Spaniards. Now the Spaniards in that tale, they needed an explorer because they needed to find this Western civilization in these cities that they was looking for. You know what I'm saying, to uncover some new resources and land for what that they was in search of. So like when we think about it, right, and step back, they found these places using African people that already had explored the continents and the shores of uncharted areas before Christopher Columbus, before a lot of these explorers that you actually might have heard of. And like, you know, so when I approach these subjects, I like to talk to you in a way to where you can get the total understanding of how things had happened, and then you can make your own viewpoint on your decision and opinion based on the facts. So when we think about this explorer being captured and enslaved, he was the one that showed them how to like navigate through to the uncharted territories, and the captains to be able to navigate to get to where they needed to be. And he did it basically, you would say, probably forcefully, more likely. So when you think about it, he was enslaved and he was captured. So in some of the books and writings, they say like he like just gave up the information. But if you're in a situation to where you have to fight, or you might be forced to do something at that day of time, or be killed, or rather be like in a better position, what would you do? So Evancio, he decided to show them different parts of the world that they had never explored. And then there was somebody even before him of African descent, and I can't think about his name at this moment, but set about traveling the world like 200 years prior to Christopher Columbus and all that type of stuff. Now, with that said, now that's how Spaniards was able to come and start, you know what I'm saying, coming over to America, and then, you know, the natives, the Indians was over here when they came over here. But however though, there was a lady, a queen named Queen Isabella, right, that really was a visionary in her mind state, to be able to see things in a different standpoint, in the world in a different standpoint, to be able to create her objective. And the same goes for when I talk about these very intellectual Africans who were traveling the world with little resources and being able to explore it to be able to help them get to what our objective goals is. So when we step back and think about, when I talk about certain type of things, and I say along the way African played a pivotal role, that's because a lot of these informations or the things that they seek and the knowledge they was getting to be able to conquer these places, you know what I'm saying, and find our home, America. Me as an American citizen, for those of you from across the world, your home could be Spain, your home could be Britain, but to find America, it took the guidance of an African individual. So with that, that's how they ended up came over here conquering the Indians. We know how that went out. If you don't, it was some harsh shit, blood was shed, it was some war going on. The Indians eventually, like, they had Motley Crue, and they were rebellious and like trying to stop them and all that with knives and little weapons and all that. But it wasn't enough. So it was a lot of bloodshed, and America was conquered. Now in the process of that, right, after years, hundreds of years, that's what made the slaves come over here, because the slaves, like, they needed slaves. They needed people that can like produce products and shit, like manufacturing and all that. And slavery was already going on, to be straight up, from shores to shores, from Africa to Britain. You know what I'm saying? Slaving their own peoples, but it was a whole different slavery approach that they took when it came to African individuals. It was some of the harshest slavery that you could ever imagine, you know, and it was very powerful, because over 35 million was lost just going through the ports to get to these places and using them as slaves. But I want to point to that, right, because it's important you know the history of things that leads up to what things has happened. So that's how blacks and Africans of a slave trade. Some Africans agreed straight up, some didn't, and traded their people for slavery and for other resources and shit like that. And it's sad though, you know, but blacks was treated the horse. But I want to point to blacks, right, because blacks are going to play a pivotal role in what I'm about to talk about when it comes to the immigration issue here in America. So the reason why the immigrants are powerful, are able to do some of the things that they're able to do right now to this day in America, right, and is because you got to keep in mind the Africans, the black individuals that was over here that was enslaved, right, and when the Civil War was going on and all that type of shit, they decided, you know what I'm saying, they didn't want to, this shit has to change. So for the rights of themselves, they started to protest, they started to galvanize, they started to get other individuals that was involved, like, to come as a group, and let's stop this harsh treatment of slaves, which was a universal understanding and togetherness. That shit needs to stop. So here in America, they protest, people blood was shed and all that, and then that's when they started, the Constitution got created, and then the 14th Amendment. Now, I always talk about the 14th Amendment, right, because like this 14th Amendment, like this some real shit. It's very, very powerful. And it inspired, and it was inspired by blacks and other whites and stuff teaming together to get these laws to pass because of the inequality and the inhumane acts that blacks were dealing with, because blacks wasn't treated as equal in the 1800s. We was treated like nothing. You know, but America realized, like, our citizens, people that help us build this country, people that help us found this country, like, they deserve better. So they took it upon themselves to change the constitutional law to make it equal treatment, and not in that equal treatment, but also due process you get to have an equal opportunity, and that goes for anybody that came to America, not just blacks. But that whole law, 14th Amendment, was shaped around the provision in the terms of giving blacks equality. And that goes back to the immigration issue and the immigrant issue of why people are allowed to come from different places, become naturalized, and can become a naturalized citizen and be treated as equal. But not just that, but also the fact that when their kids are born here, they are considered citizens of America, as the constitutional law was built based on the foundation of those single lines in there, that if your kids is born here, they are U.S. citizens, and if you come over as an immigrant, you could be a naturalized and become a natural citizen. Now, that's what the 14th Amendment was intended for, to show blacks that we are treating you as equal. Now, we know, if we premise it on that, it's still a lot of shit that needs to be happening and needs to be done over here in America, as far as blacks being treated equally. But when you gather around and you come with these posters and these bulletins about immigrants, and America was built on a nation of immigrants, there's some truth to that. But however, we got to understand what was the intended purpose of these laws and these constitutional laws that was presented, specifically the 14th Amendment. So now I know immigrants, they took over in the 1920s. A lot of people don't know they started taking work, paying less. But however, taking pay less. But however, unfortunately, right, when it comes to immigration and immigrant, I want you to think about this. America's founded, right? America is doing the right thing by allowing people to come on their shores and interact and all that type of stuff. And it's a considerate act, especially at that time when you have other parts of the world that's still living under a real authoritative type of grasp. So when we fast forward to this stage and format where we're talking about immigration and immigrants and what was responsible for the nation to be considered an immigrant place, it has kind of like went a little bit out of control. Because now we have to also take into consideration that as an American, we have to protect our soil. If you're in London, you got to protect your soil. If you're in Spain, you got to protect your soil. If you're in Africa, you got to protect your soil. But if we can take a lesson from Africa that the framers had in mind, intended over there, it was a little like, it messed up a little bit because they allowed people to take over and get inside. And it's unclear whether they even run Africa with all the influence and the investments they got from different type of places. And that's crazy, right? Because when I think about Russia, that's a whole nother story. And I think that has something to do with it when it comes to him essentially Putin saying, "Nah, we're not going to let people on the shores of our coast. Of course, we know it's resources that's involved because us as America want the resources. But however, it's also a bigger picture attached to it because it's the shores right there. And if you notice, when you see at the map of Russia, it's all water in the back, and that's all their shit. And then it's a shore and a port right there. Plus, we don't talk about that. We want to set up U.S. embassies and naval embassies in a place that's close. And that's why I believe truly that Putin is like really not trying to like allow too much shit over there, because he knows from histories and lessons, if you allow too much people to get too close, it could be a possibility of a threat. And we can talk about the resources, of course, right? But it's still more to it than meets the eyes when it comes to certain interests and behind some grain or some resources and stuff. But now I want to step back, right? And I know some might look at me different or have a different opinion, but that's okay. I'm just giving you my perspective. So now, to come back to America, right? First, we have to remember how immigrants was allowed over here, and how kids were allowed to become citizens over here. It all predicated off the 14th Amendment. And we must remember that you must protect your shores, but we must remember, like, at the end of the day, like, we have to be smart in allowing who we're going to allow in and who we're not going to allow in. You know what I'm saying? And moving away to where it's logical, makes sense, instead of moving off a feeling that's senseless. Now,